Welcome to Great Taste. I'm your host, Steve Boss. 60 minutes upcoming of deliciousness. My guest is Jason Hammel. He's the executive chef and co-owner of Lula Cafe, a Chicago community institution since 1999. It is known for its creative seasonal cuisine and artistic ethos. And I didn't write that, but it sounded so good, I decided to use it. He was not a trained chef when Lula launched. He learned on the job side by side with his friend, his co-owner and later wife, Leah Childs. They cooked their way through books written by well-known chefs and cookbook authors like Alice Waters, Jacques Pepin, Elizabeth David, Richard Olney, Charlie Trotter, and many others. Previous to working behind a stove, Chef Hammel completed his master's degree in English and was working on being a writer. Now, I can just say that when you read this book, you will understand why that was a career he could have pursued, and maybe he still will at some point in time, because it's an absolutely beautifully written book. And I'm going to read it just a little bit from part of it just before I let him talk. You write, "This wasn't the plan, being a chef, that is. Owning a restaurant, living in Chicago, but writing a book. Yes, that was always the plan. So the book isn't about me as a chef, rather it's about the spirit of being young and just giving it a shot. I will share the moments that made these times in our lives, moments expressed through the language of food, in the hope that they will bear beautiful blossoms of luck in your lives too." So welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time to
Well,
chat.
thank you for having me. Thanks for reading the beginning of the intro out loud. It sounded nice.
I'm going to try to keep myself from reading a lot of other stuff from the book and let you talk. My wife warned me. She said, "Let the man talk." You know, people can read the book, but I do want to read a couple of other little things really quickly. So Lula opened on September 2nd, 1999, and there was a line, right, when you first opened?
There was, yeah.
Yeah, because that was a known place. We're not going to go into that story right now, but it had been a
It was a beloved place that we took over.
right, a beloved place that you took over. But it gained recognition, Lula did, outside of Chicago when Regina Schramling's New York Times article on the Chicago dining scene was published on August 8th, 2001. The name of the article is "In American Cooking, Chicago's the Kitchen." And that actually was how I found out about Lula for the first time.
Oh, you remember this article?
I remembered the article. I went and looked it up then after I
That's
read
a
about
big
the
deal
book.
for us.
Right. And it was like, whoa, of course, that's how I knew about Lula. How else would I know about her? I live 5 hours away and in a little
Hmm.
small town in Iowa, right? And here's what a little bit from what she wrote. "The meal that really brought home the notion of Chicago as the first true melting pot that really cooks, though was brunch at Lula, a tiny, quirky, be prepared to wait cafe in the Logan Square neighborhood just beyond Bucktown and Wicker Park. Brunch is the most American of meals to begin with. A chef can get away with a smorgasbord. At the height of the new American craze, there was more of an effort to put together dishes from different regions to make a menu: New England flapjacks, New Orleans pain perdu, but it actually had an equal but separate effect. Every dish was still a regional conceit. At Lula, Leah Childs and Jason Hammel have moved beyond that. Their cheesy, eggy spinach strata was like a marriage of quiche and bread pudding made in Italy. And their tamales were actually grilled polenta topped with eggs and chev, black beans, corn, and a poblano sauce. So that article was the inspiration for when my wife and I were able to finally come to Lula. It was either in 2002, 2003, I don't remember now, but it was on a Monday night when you had the farm dinner,
Mm.
24 bucks.
Yeah, that's why it started $24.
So now I'm gonna let you talk, but it was such a joy for me to read this in the book and then to go look it up and remember back to, oh yeah, that's it. What a great place. And we had such a wonderful time there. And we've been back several times since. And so yeah,
So
what it
that the introduction must have been evocative for you because it tells the story of those years and the sort of the pre-internet, foodie years when people were trying, had different ways of discovering new restaurants and new neighborhoods and new places to explore. It was definitely a different information age then.
most definitely. And you wrote exactly, I was trying to understand for myself, what is it that when we come to Chicago, which isn't that often, Lula is a destination, one of the destinations that we have. And Logan Square is always the destination because of
Hmm.
it's an amazing place for dining. It's just anything that you could possibly want, you can find there, and it's always fantastic. So, and I have many friends who over the years have grown to love Lula too, which is fantastic. It makes me feel good because they always report, oh, I went to Lula last week or whatever, you know. So and you might find it also interesting. One of the other places that they like to go to is Giant. So that's somebody who trained essentially under you,
Our
Jason.
first sous chef. Yes, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it seems, I mean, maybe one of the reasons that you like Logan Square and Logan Square restaurants is that they do continue to maintain their independent operator spirit, which I think Lula embodies, as a project. I think other people saw our success and think, oh, I can do that too, which is absolutely the case.
Mhm.
And, it continues to happen that way. And there's a small bakery and sandwich shop down the street called Loaf Lounge, run by Ben Lusbader and Sarah Mispagel, both of whom worked with us at Nightwood, but Ben also worked at Lula originally. So it continued, and they have a place that's full of real like heart and soul, and they're there every day, and that continues. Those kinds of places continue to pop up in Logan Square, sort of scrappy DIY. We can do it. Yes, we can kind of
Mhm.
places.
And you mentioned Nightwood. Nightwood was another restaurant that you owned at one time. It was one of my favorite places. Always loved to sit at the counter there. It was just
Yeah,
fantastic.
great restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
restaurant.
we owned that for 6 years and closed it in 2015.
Hmm. So this is what you write in the book, which I think it fits in with what you were just saying. I think there is a democratizing aspect to Lula that has made it last. It isn't the cooking. It's the way you feel, a deep and interstitial,
Interstitial.
interstitial,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Network. That's a tough one. Of personal stories as you walk
SAT
in.
prep right there.
I'm
I'm
way
sorry. Go ahead.
I'm way
Yeah.
past that.
Yeah, me too. I got kids doing that now, though. Go ahead.
Well, can you say that again?
Interstitial.
Interstitial network of personal stories as you walk in, a forest of Chicago lives, and then the way you feel like your story belongs here too. But I think the beauty of the narrative nest you feel really comes from the staff. Young people new to the city continue to find their place at Lula. They come to us with that same radical openness, searching in the mist for a future they have yet to see. They cast themselves in their own bohemian play of nights out, art exhibitions, shows, assignations of the young, living on the same precipice that led me to open Lula in 1999, just giving it a shot, no sense that they might fall. The willingness to take risks, to fail and try again, and to learn in the process. This remains at the core of our mission today, to embrace change and assume the best in all.
Yeah. I mean that I read before I wrote that I had read this book called Overstory by Richard Powers, the novel. And it takes a lot of its structure and some of its content about forests and trees. And it's a fascinating book. He's a great writer. But one of the things that it talks about is, we tend to think of forests as, a collection of like individual, you know, creatures, trees. And in fact, they're like completely interconnected and and dependent on each other. And there have been studies that say that they actually like talk to each other and share resources and sort of warn each other about dangers, et cetera, things that I found completely fascinating. And I think about Lula and the community in that way. It's definitely, they'll say stronger together. It's not just a bunch, group of individuals that happen to find their way here. Yes, we are that, but also like together we've created something that has its like a shared life, together, a shared life force.
It might be good for me to also mention, because I believe I forgot at the beginning of the show, that you wrote the Lula Cafe cookbook was published in 2023, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, this is all from this book.
Right, all from the book. And I forgot to finish my lunch, so I thought I would do that real quickly.
Oh, we got let's some passiaya there.
I think you might be right. I think you might be
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's a little cool now, but excuse
Yeah,
me one
yeah,
second.
yeah.
Huh? Mm.
It's hard to, you might need to put that in the microwave.
We know one. Mm. I'll tell you something. I served that for lunch today for three of us. It was amazing. Now, I have to admit, I've never had that at Lula, but I will the next time I come. And that dish has been on the menu since the first night. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that was it's actually the first recipe in the cookbook.
Hmm.
And it's a family recipe from my wife's Greek family. We definitely have changed it a little bit. But it definitely signifies something to me. It's like, the food that we do is definitely grounded in our our history and our experience, but it also, we want it to be something a little bit surprising. It's, it's comfort food, but it's not I don't know, it's not always the most expected thing. So this dish is the pasta with brown butter and garlic. No rules broken there. Feta cheese, which is the Greek, coming through, and then cinnamon. And cinnamon is that outside like surprise. A lot of people think cinnamon is only in, sweet cooking, when here it is in a savory dish. But something between the cinnamon and the brown butter and the way that the those flavors combine is really sort of evocative and beautiful to me. And so that's what we're looking for in everything we do, is like some kind of surprising moment between ingredients that takes you somewhere else, even if it's pretty simple, but it should be evocative, unusual, strange in such a way that, but still delicious in such a way that, enlivens your senses. And that's what we're looking for in all the cooking that we're doing.
Yeah, I think that when you said that, unusual and strange, but when you taste it, it's like, oh,
It
uh,
makes sense.
right. It's like, I, how could I never would have thought of something like that. And I really would like to get into the creative process in a little bit as we continue talking. But before that, could we talk just a little bit about the beginning days I mentioned before that you
For
weren't a
sure.
trained chef, and you write that you and Leah would cook up specials on the fly, serving them only when they were ready at quantities that made me laugh when I think of them now. And then you
Yep.
were introduced, it seemed like from the narrative in the book, that you came across a book, Charlie Trotter's Vegetables, and that started to change things a little bit.
It did. It took us out of the sort of 90s cafe realm that we were in and into something completely different. I mean, I had never had a fancy meal like that. Not that I went to Charlie Trotter's for in the beginning of Lula. We didn't have that kind of money. But I got the book, and it was the first time I'd seen like truly seasonal cooking, meaning I saw the path of the season through the year, and especially since it was Chicago based, that it lined up. I had learned about Alice Waters. I knew that there was this California cuisine out there, but I didn't, with Trotter, it was connected to Chicago in a way that made sense to me. It was all this at the same time that I discovered the farmers markets. And we really started to get interested in some of the more fine dining elements of the Trotter book. And ended up making it to Trotters. Our staff got together and put their money together and bought us two gift certificates. So my first like fine dining meal ever was the Charlie Trotters, and I think in 2001. I'll never forget it.
And then, as you said, you started to be introduced to beyond that, the books of Alice Waters, for example, when you were exploring farmers markets. And also at the same time, I want to say that you were using those books as you were actually cooking. You're not
Oh yeah,
necessarily the recipes out, but like when you're preparing, some meat dish, and you had, well, how do I get this meat into the right portion, essentially, in the right
oh
piece.
yeah,
You have Jacques Pepin's book out there looking at it while you're
yeah.
doing it.
100%, 100%. I mean, we used that, but the La Technique book a lot, and my copy is fully demolished. And the French Laundry book, that was a big one too. And in fact, Thomas Keller ate last summer ate at Lula for the first time. And a funny story is that I was, sitting as I do on a milk crate in in the alley talking on the phone about some, problem a restaurant owner would face. And I saw this car pull up in front of Lula and Thomas Keller get out. And, I, you know, freaked out and jumped up and went inside and introduced myself and had him sign my book. And he insisted on getting a special pen to sign it. That's the kind of guy Keller would be. But I showed him my book, and my book was just, I mean, there's no spine left. It's got, pages full of notes and splashes and, stains, and it's just destroyed. And that's because we were literally opening it up and being like, okay, so we want to make a puree, and like Keller says to do it this way. So but he used fennel. We want to use like sorrel. So like, let's do it the same way, but we'll read the recipe and substitute this and that. And that's how we learned to cook. And I mean, I have a huge cookbook collection. This morning I was, trying to think through a new asparagus dish. And I was, flipping through books just to get ideas of ingredients, because, the world is full of 1,000, options for cooking, and it's, you only have one brain. So you try to, dig into books and see what other people have done, and maybe that inspires you to think about it differently. It's not like people who write novels don't read novels. It's not like people who paint paintings don't look at other paintings. So people who write recipes definitely study other recipes, and I think there's a great resource and like really connecting to cookbooks.
It was a time, as you mentioned earlier, way before Yelp, way before everybody was a critic, and people found out about restaurants by reading the restaurant columns in newspapers and hearing what other people's experiences were that were friends of theirs. And you write that we came together to do something creative and fun without pressure or consequence. No one was watching. Even if there was an industry back then, we wouldn't have belonged. We were outsiders, part of a culture that articulated itself in periphery to the center, the straight, the downtown. And what you said, I think, was that it's still somewhat, maybe you can't do it exactly the same anymore, but that area is still an area where you are still free to express your creativity, and people can still make something happen in a way that's completely outside, we'll say, what's normal these days, with huge amounts of money from outside investors, that type of thing.
Yeah, that is true. It still is happening, but it's so much more difficult than it was then. There's so much more on the line, and it eats people up a lot. I mean, I think that what happened with us, like, the origin story, is just, something that would be have a hard time manifesting now, just especially just like financially, like how much money we had, what we were able to do with it. I was listening to a podcast today where Donnie Medea was recounting the early days of Blackbird in the late 90s, and how he strapped a small budget together. And it reminded me a lot of what we did with Lula. It's so much more challenging these days due to the cost of entry, and just the way the Chicago business world works. But it does still happen. Like I mentioned, that Loaf Lounge up the street from me, they found an old restaurant and were able to convert it, and are slowly building their life stream in that space and doing a really great job. So yes, it certainly does happen.
Mm-hmm. In the book, I would love if you could kind of give us a picture, because you share, I think that I know that that's one of the reasons that I was so attracted to the book, because it's a book that was written from the heart. There's no doubt about that. And so even though it's a book that has a lot of recipes in it, there's so many stories from your family, from the restaurant. And there's a team there from the beginning, a team that you and Leah, that you were friends for several years before you, according to what you write, ever realized that there was something else between the two of you. And you say that you write, she of the preternaturally sensitive palate, How about this? What does it need? Her not liking what I made was devastatingly hard to take. A pleased smile propelled me on.
Still the case.
Mm.
I mean, as a marriage goes on, like I think there's certainly I think maybe in all marriages, like we really depend on each other for to just to give feedback, like constructive, helpful feedback, in whatever way we can, because you need that. And as certainly, outside of any kind of like school or like friend community, and you're not going to get that from anybody else. Like nobody's going to tell me when something is bad here. I mean, I'll know inside like not bad. We would never say everything it's bad, but like when I'm working on something, if it's not going in the right direction, there's nobody who's going to come and say like, hey, maybe you should go a different way with this, other than my wife. So we still really depend on each other for like that kind of guidance, collaboration.
So you share a number of things from your family backgrounds. The recipe, for example, we talked about pasta yaya comes from Leah's
Hmm.
family background. Your family, you say, were the kind of Americans who on the 4th of July served caprese kebabs alongside the hot dogs and burgers.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm from an Italian family, so there's a lot of Italian food everywhere. Exactly.
right. And I I loved the story of the panzanella recipe. Could you just
Uh-huh.
share that with us?
Sure. I mean, I the panzanella recipe. I could have we've done many bread salads at Lula. And the story I tell is about my father-in-law, Leah's father. He lived with us for 5 years in the house here in Logan Square, and passed away in 2021, late 21. And it was a pandemic era story that I told because he was a beautiful man. He's an artistic man. He was an architect, and he played the piano, and he loved food, and he loved really. I mean, he was an older guy, of course, but he was really connected to just like experiences, and he loved food. And I was cooking because the restaurant was closed for a little while in the pandemic, and that was very unusual for me to be home. And like everybody else, I got into making sourdough, and I was baking at home and making all this bread. And so, what did we have to do with all this bread? We made salads with big crunchy croutons, and I just remember him just constantly like pulling um his crunchy bread through the whatever vinaigrette was left down in the bottom of the bowl, like sopping it up. And so I got ideas like that from him, and living with him. But I mean, in the book I tell the story about how, I mean, I lived in Italy. I had a panzanella salad on a Tuscan farm. I've had all these sort of really classic experiences that one could write prosaically about in a cookbook. But instead of that, I'm like choosing to write about this old man, taking a hunk of bread and dipping it in the salad sauce, so to speak. And that's what I think about when I make a panzanella now. So what I'm trying to do in that is like just say that like all these love stories, these interpersonal stories that you have in your life, like so many of them are connected to food, and that's what I think about now when I make this salad. I think about him, and that's why the recipes are all dated. They have like a specific date and a time, because this like is something I made on that day for him, and that's a memory that it'll never repeat. And so I had this recognition that these food experiences, like that's what the recipes are for. They're to create experiences, not to replicate them, not to replicate the past, but to like make something that could be a new thing. So yeah, I'm glad you noticed that story about Ivan. He was a great influence in my life and my kids' lives.
You do right that let's be real and admit the recipes are themselves a very feeble translation of what happens when we cook. And don't think of them, you tell the you say in the book, you write in the book, don't think of them as musical notation. They aren't as intuitive or as exact. Nature simply doesn't make the same thing more than once. One leek can taste different from the next. A tomato can be juicier or more acidic than one growing on the same vine. Human days can make soft pasta. And you go on about that and conclude with there was a certain time and place when we created this plate, and now that time is gone. So don't try to recreate the thing we achieved. Just use the recipes to expose the beauty of the day you're in. And I'd like to start there talking about the different ways that people can use this book, because I think that's a perfect place to jump in. Just use the recipes to express the beauty of the day you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I have made that point many times in my career, and like maybe that's a cover up for, not being the best recipe keeper in terms of, I mean, we've had thousands of dishes over the years, and I don't think that we've kept track of all of them. That's what I'm saying. That said, I I believe that, the recipes, at least the way that I use recipes, is for inspiration and insight and not for replication and repetition. And I want people to use these in the same way. I want them to see, you know, uh, it's a combination of ingredients, whether it's, the chickpeas and spring onions, or, parsnip and mushroom, and just like pick those things up and be, oh, I'll make something different with those same ingredients. Or, I'll use the this, vinaigrette and from the panzanella, but I'll use it on something else, Um, or just like think about the way that we do use citrus with bitter greens. Make your own citrus and bitter green salad, but there's a really good story about it in the book, and like that'll make you excited about going to the grocery store and picking out some citrus. So I think the cookbook can engage in a bunch of different ways. Either straight up technique, like this is how I made this thing, and then you can make your own thing in that way, or ingredient combinations, which I think is very, sort of engaging, and like definitely, it makes you, approach a farmer's market or a grocery store in a different way.
Well, let's just talk about a few of the different things that you write about in the book. When we cook, we're looking to build flavor in layers, one step at a time. Deep flavors develop sequentially. I think this is something that one of the things that I think a home cook, I know myself, doesn't think enough about.
Yeah, I'll tell you that a lot of line cooks don't think about that either, because line cooking is about efficiency, and this is one of the things that really hurts restaurants. Efficiency is, can be the enemy of quality at some points. And, being a chef is all about juggling the tensions between being efficient and doing things the hard way, which is, slow and slow so that you get it right. And, I've seen many times, cooks do something where, if a pasta is calling for garlic and anchovy and then lemon and parsley, like putting a pan on the stove with those things in it and turning the pan on, that's not going to give you the same effect as if you cook the garlic first to a certain point, and with the anchovy at the midpoint, and then maybe some pepper flakes, and then you turn the heat to a different level and add the lemon at the end and toss the pasta in it, and then parsley at the end, and maybe the lemon in the early part with zest, and then juice at the final steps, because all those things, the way that that's built, there's an architecture of flavor, and you don't get that by throwing everything in at once. So that was the idea there, and that's like very true of some of the recipes that are longer cooking ones as well, like the tagine and the or the bolognese, or even there's a dish with clams and tomato that you have to do in sequential steps, and that's how you get the qualities that you're looking for.
I think that because of the lifestyle that so many people live today, when they're listening or watching this, they may be saying, I'm never doing I'm never going to take the time to do all this, so I don't have the time. I just want to say, if you take the time, you're going to find, I'll bet, that you will begin to take the time all the time to do it that way, because everything that will happen from that moment on in terms of the way your taste buds will be lit up, you'll just be amazed. And so I'm just
Yeah.
going to bring that in as a give it a shot and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what the best restaurants that when you go to a great restaurant, have a great meal, they're taking the time to like develop systems around those sequences and train and educate around them so that they're developed in the right way. And that the cheese that you have on your, is freshly grated, or the herbs are picked and they're cared for in the right way, or the radishes are shaved at the last minute, or even like something, that sounds a little bit more like casual, or less refined, like fish and chips, like the or frying, like those techniques, like they require, like, not just attention to detail, but like doing something in the right way every time. And some people will make their batters to order, that will create a really a great piece of tempura or something. So doing that takes more effort and more time in the moment. And so, and that's where the quality comes from.
And you say to people, but one of the things that you can do to make that easier is getting certain steps done ahead of time.
Yes, that's the restaurant way. Yeah, having like, a sofrito done ahead of time, which is when you cook onions and olive oil. You do basically the beginning part of the recipe ahead. We do that very frequently. And so you could do that, something that takes, 45 minutes to cook that, or, 30 minutes. You could have that done so that you just spoon it in and then get going. That is definitely the way that restaurants work, and certainly this one.
And there's a number of recipes in the book for other preparations that you can use in that style, we'll say.
Right, right. We call them building blocks, things that you can, then use on other, again, I want people to take the sofrito from one recipe and use it in a pasta at home, or make some couscous and throw it in there, or take a gremolata or salsa verde from another recipe, and then, cook a steak outside at a barbecue and use that. That's the whole pleasure of this kind of cooking.
So how do you know if something is done, you ask? You touch it, you taste it, you feel it with your hand. Taste your food. It seems silly to say it, but so many cooks forget to try what they make. Use your senses, touch, prod, sip, lick, crunch down on everything. This is I know this is advice that you're giving your cooks, but I mean, this is like perfect for anyone who's cooking at home too.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how you learn to season things. You taste them, unseasoned, and get to the point where you feel good about them. But I mean, certainly not tasting is a habit that, people expect something just to work out, and it doesn't every time. Things change in the pan. So yeah, I encourage lots of tasting. I mean, there's a little piece in there about this recurring dream that I've had many times where I wake up and I realize that I've had this dream again, which the dream is of a long banquet table, like sort of in, you know, uh, a king's banquet, and I'm seated at one end, and all these servers come in with, silver covered trays and lift them ceremoniously at the one moment. And on the trays are the 100 bites that I have, tasted over the course of the day. And, because I'm just sticking my spoon in all sorts of things and trying stuff. That's what I do all day long. And so, yeah, that's important to do as a chef.
By the way, I had a nightmare last night about making this pasta yaya today. I
Oh,
won't
that's
even
funny.
go into the details, but boy, it was not pretty. Let's put it that way.
Sorry,
Uh,
I apologize.
that's right. It doesn't, can you tell us about this big pot of soup in terms of how that goes into assisting a home cook to understand seasoning more?
Yeah, I mean, I think seasoning is the hardest thing to get right in cooking. And by seasoning, I'm really just talking about salt. I mean, it's this balance of salt and acid. And there are some other factors that, sweetness is definitely a factor. But it's really about salt. And salt is just I mean, you're shooting an arrow into a target there, and the bullseye is not tiny, but it's also not enormous. So, you miss on one side and it's too salty, and you miss on the other side and it's flavorless. So I really encourage people to use to practice on big pots of soup. And by doing that, I always tell people, do not, you make a pot of soup and there's a pot of soup on the stove. You do not put salt into that pot of soup. You take some of the soup out and into a small container, and you taste that, and then you season that container with salt, and then you have to work on the acid. And certainly it's like sometimes lemon, sometimes white vinegar, sometimes a sherry vinegar, or something else. And if you feel like you need a fresh flavor, like a little chopped parsley at the end, or other lemon juice or something like that, then you try that and you taste it and you get it to the place where you think it's delicious. And once you're there, then you hold on to that sample and you make the rest of the pot of soup into that sample. I mean, it's, and then you're keep tasting and tasting and tasting until you have this like, ratatouille moment where it's like, oh, the soup is beautiful. So that is how I teach cooks this season, so that they can see the progression of like what salt does to flavors as you build it up. You start small and keep adding, because salt is one thing that you can always do more of, but you can't take it away.
I, I'm speechless almost. I mean, it's just like I'm so excited because I just have learned so much from this book. It's crazy because I talk to cookbook authors all the time, and there always are some really wonderful things. But these practical steps coming from that, we'll say, chef's viewpoint, and seeing what has been necessary to teach the people that are creating those dishes at the restaurant, and then applying them in the book for all of us as home cooks, it's just totally invaluable. Like, for example, I straight up beg you to dress the salad with your clean, bare hands. Feel the aliveness of the vegetable.
Oh, that's also my diatribe against gloves, because when I started in restaurants, there was no such thing as plastic gloves. And these days, cooks just are always scared to touch things. And yeah, get your hands dirty, wash them first, please, but then get them dirty and feel what the greens feel like when they're dressed properly. They have a certain feeling. They're not damp and wet and, slovenly. They're still like alive and bright, and they have just the right amount of dressing on them. And that's how, that's just the basics that are so important to execute every time.
Why is celery the most underappreciated vegetable of all
Oh
time?
my God, I agree. Yeah, why? I don't, you tell me.
I don't know why either. I like
People
celery.
have an issue with celery. I mean, it's got kind of a, you know, is there like a something about it that makes people think of like poor times, like where you just have like, a stone soup kind of you know, association. I'm not sure, but every time I put celery on the menu, I'm excited, and people are like, "Oh, celery? Oh, never thought about that one." Just sitting there in the grocery store for no reason.
It could be that they haven't had the opportunity. If they can go to their farmer's market and get fresh celery that one of the farmers is bringing in from their
Yeah,
field, that's a completely different experience than what we find on the grocery store shelf.
it's true. That is true. Although I still like the groceries, the full of water celery too. But I think people find it has this real strong taste.
So there are other ingredients too that people can easily, I think, incorporate into some of the dishes that they make at home that we may not have even thought about how to use them in this way. I know, for example, miso was one of them, because you say that we let it caramelize in browning butter.
Yeah, we do that, which is something that, is not typical of Japanese cuisine for sure. We've used it in the sofrito section of the recipe for several years, and we'll continue to do those kinds of things. But um, yeah, that's one that I feel like is really I mean, it's again evocative, and it kind of brings out this like uniquely like strange quality that then is also just delicious.
Adding seeds to pasta.
Yep, that's another one. I remember, I tell a story about cooking a pasta dish in Italy as a professional chef and using sesame seeds and them all looking at me like I was crazy.
The word that came to mind was chutzpah when I read that. That was
Yeah, yeah. Or just, I don't know, some kind of stupid, blind stupidity. I didn't think, oh, maybe this would, maybe someone would be surprised by this and not like it, but they actually did like it. So that worked out.
Here's some more advice. Your finger is worth more than whatever you're cutting.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you liked, that little passage is about using a mandolin. And we use those plastic Berliner Japanese mandolins in the restaurant for everything. They're incredibly sharp and they will take off the tip of your finger. And I tell a story in the book about my mother who this wasn't exactly like that Japanese mandolin. She bought one of those like it slices, it dices kind of machines on late night TV, but it was a mandolin. And she cut herself pretty badly. And I remember being a kid down watching TV downstairs and hearing her screaming upstairs. I mean, she survived, she was fine. But I mean, it's true, like those kind of machines, I think I say they make things so easy that you kind of forget what you forget what you're doing. It leads to, a lack of attention. And that is the definitely the enemy of safety there.
And in that same regard, you say doing the simple things right makes far more intention than it seems.
Y yes. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm
Takes
talking
sorry,
about. I mean,
sorry, take.
all of our cooking is certainly that way. Um, so I mean, that was a safety, warning, but it also is about how you cook in the kitchen.
Yeah. Don't expect a tomato to be delicious just because you bought it at a farmer's market.
Oh, that's true and sad. But I mean, that's true for so many things in the farmer's market. It's not good just because it's there. And like, obviously I support farmers for, and have for years. But you have to go there with a critical eye as well. And they have crop that they have to sell and they deserve to sell it. But at the same time, like you gotta, find the stuff that makes sense. So for your kitchen. So in the book I really recommend I mean, you got to get to know these people. They're the ones who are going to tell you which ones are good and which ones aren't. And you're looking for people who are really passionate about what they do. Not every single person at a farmer's market is going to be that way. There's, search out the ones that really have the commitment and the passion, and the drive, because there's certain types of vegetables and fruits that take so much effort to grow that they're going to want to tell their stories about how they got there. So I mean, just get to know your farmers. It's a cliched phrase, but man, it's so true.
I want to bring up bitter again because you brought it up earlier. You write, because I do feel, not to be dramatic, heightened physiological senses when eating bitter things. They are a foil to other tastes on the tongue. Without bitterness, sweet things are saccharine, vapid, cloying. Without bitterness, fatty things would taste plump and numb as a swollen lip. So this is some great information for a home cook in terms of being able to put different types of taste together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you pointed that out. Those are some of my favorite sentences in the book too. I am always using bitter things, especially radicchios, chicories. And that's in part, I mean, it's because we like the flavor so much and it's exactly what you just talked about, how they break up the sweetness or acidity, and they just, sort of they're the cymbals on the drum set, they break things up like that. And but also because, hell, we're in the Midwest, and we're looking for some hardy greens as well. So anytime there's someone who grows radicchio around here, which is not an easy thing, excuse me, not an easy thing to grow, I usually sign up to buy all of it, whoever it is.
Uh, One last piece of advice at the moment. Please be cautious with leeks.
That's another funny line right there. Yeah, and I think I said like it's a undercooked leek is an awful thing.
Like a bad kiss, you'll never get over it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, a soft, tender leek is a delight. A stringy and impossible to eat one is something you want to avoid, especially in that dish, which is I think the leek's vinaigrette on the duck, and where you're really featuring the leeks and drawing attention to them.
So there's a story in the book. This for me, it's just very simplistic in terms of try this, you'll like it kind of thing. Because there's a story in there about prosciutto and melon, and it fits in with a lot of other things that we've talked about. But it was such a wonderful story. I wonder if you would mind just retelling it.
Sure. Would you like me to read it, what I
Oh,
wrote,
sure,
or
if you'd
just
like.
tell it from
Yes,
the beginning? Oh my God,
absolutely.
I gotta find it though. 1 second.
I mean, I have it
Um,
right here, but
yeah, no, I have it up on my screen since
oh, good.
I knew maybe we would be talking about these things. Can you remind me what page it's on?
I only have the PDF, so
Yeah, oh, that's what I'm looking at too.
oh
Okay, one
gosh.
second. I got it. I got it. I got
Oh,
it.
you got it. Good. That's good because I
Yeah.
have to get it.
Okay. So this is from a dish called cantaloupe with chimichurri. It's from uh, late July in 2014. In the ancient walled city of Lucca in Tuscany, Leah and I waited for an hour outside a popular trattoria with our 2 young children. After a day spent at the beaches in Lerici and 2+ hours in the car, they were in that state of restless fatigue we parents call overtired. The 2-year-old stalked the rim of the fountain basin like a cat, and the 6-year-old counted skips across the piazza and back, and across again. My poor wife seemed to have fallen asleep standing up. When we were finally brought to the table around 10 o'clock, the children were at a restraint worthy stage of madness. I ordered all the antipasti and attempted to calm nerves with descriptions of what we were about to eat. Izzy, I told my daughter, it's your favorite, prosciutto. Ismene loved prosciutto. With melon, I exclaimed. She gave a skeptical look. I don't want fruit. I want food, she said. You're gonna love it. You'll see. A simple plate of prosciutto and Tuscan melon was set on the table, and we all dug in, my daughter first. She shoved thin slices of ham in her mouth, one on top of the other. No, 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 I said. Eat the melon with the prosciutto like this. Trust me. I wrapped the ham around the slice of melon and set it in her little hand. She closed her eyes defiantly, pinched her nostrils shut, and took a bite. A look of pure, transformative joy came across her face, a smile I can still remember. Dad, she said, you were such an amazing chef. How did you ever think of this combination? So that's my story when my daughter thought that I invented prosciutto and melon. It's hysterical. And
It's
she
just
still actually hates fruit and savory food, still to
ah,
this day.
oh that's very interesting because one of the things that you say, I don't know if I can go back to it right now and find it, but it's something about fruit, uh, pieces of fruit in soups, right? Oh, eating a spoonful of juicy, crunchy fruit
Yeah.
soup is pretty much the most fun you'll have with a bowl of soup.
Yeah. Yep, that's from that chilled soup. Yeah,
Yeah.
she still thinks that it doesn't belong, like apples in salad or cherries or cranberries in salad or things like that. She can't have that. But she loved the prosciutto and melon, so I'll always have that. But
Well, it's
hysterical,
all
right? She thought I invented that.
hysterical, but it's all part of this whole creative process. Just before we go into that, I want to just say I do agree with you that you're from New Haven. I think New Haven pizza is amazing, and you
Thank
say
you.
in the book, and wow. Anyway, for creating a new dish, you talked about it. Reading chefs, reading recipe books, and I'm sure when you're out and eating at other restaurants, the idea is you describe creating a new dish as something that happens in a variety of ways. For example, seeing something another chef's doing that sparks an idea. You say in the book, or a process in the kitchen is more likely to occur like this, you said. It was a hot night in August, late after service, and the line were all these random tops and bottoms of gorgeous ripe heirloom tomatoes from Leaning Shed Farm on the cutting board. Chef de cuisine Sarah Rinkovage, is that right?
Rinkovich. Yep.
Mitch
Yep.
made an improvisatory snack. She dipped some tomato in the anchovy aioli from our fregola dish and gave a giddy smile. I got an idea, she said.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a different approach, thinking through different ingredients. Potatoes go with butter, trout goes with butter and almonds, almonds go with peaches, peaches go with brown butter goes with sesame. As we swirl these kinds of thoughts around, flavors start to orbit our central ingredient, in this case, new potatoes, like wayward moons. I hope you do
So
write.
that's
Hope you do write
yeah,
more.
thanks. I'm working on some stuff.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually I'm doing a reading that's this sort of like culinary spoken word thing in a couple of weeks. So I'm currently working on a piece right now.
Nice. Nice. Um, so finished dish you write is a tension between harmony and contrast of sweet and smoky and salty of texture too, but it's also about the connections the flavors have in our experience, in our minds, in culinary culture and tradition, and the connections made literally face to face that day. And so you say that at Lula you push the limits of what can reasonably connect, and you've mentioned that throughout our discussion actually.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's always seems to me what's astounding about it is the result is the same. It's surprising, and I think that's what becomes the engaging aspect of it, because it just kind of like you kind of just your brain doesn't connect, and then all of a sudden it connects and goes, oh, you know?
Well, I think that that's what that little piece of writing is kind of about. Like the connections can't be completely arbitrary, and they can't be too sort of like aggressively at odds with each other. And I think that's where like some kind of like fusion turns people off because you'll have like I don't know so I'm trying to think of a good example of this, but things that are like really specific to certain cuisines that don't seem to belong to each other coming like entering in together. And in this case, like you're making connections, like this goes with that, and then you're making a substitution for the that to another that. So then all of a sudden you have a relationship between two things, but there is a bridge that gets you there. And there's constantly times when I'm talking to young cooks here about ideas where I'm saying, that doesn't work. So why doesn't that work? It's like too far. It's too, it's strange for its own strangeness. It's odd for it's aggressively odd. So let's try to think about something that like it's a little more accessible, but that still surprises people and engages them.
Mhm.
So we are always having those kind of conversations. And sometimes I have the cooks, give them a bunch of ingredients and ask them just to make connections between them as like a practice, and a practice not like in the idea of a praxis, like just like something that you need to constantly be doing as a way of being as in cooking. So that's something I think about all the time. What goes with what? Who says what goes with what? Like what's the history behind what goes with what? And then how do we disrupt that history in a way that still like refers to it and makes people feel, connected. So that's what we do when we build ingredients together.
I have a couple of final thoughts that I want to mention before we unfortunately end this chat. But I wanted to ask you, do you have anything that you would like to say that is on the tip of your tongue right now that you haven't been able to get in?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm really appreciative of your interest in the language of the book and how we come to think about the place that food has in our lives. It means a lot to me that you've noticed a lot of my favorite lines. So I appreciate that attention.
I have over 20 pages of notes, so I'm sure there's other favorite lines in there that we won't get to. But I want to just address one thing that you talk about in terms of who owns a recipe, because you make it very clear in here that even though these are, we'll say, the recipes that are included in your book, and you're the author of the book, that these recipes are a compilation in many cases of lots of other people's thoughts and hard work
And their hard work. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure that that is abundantly clear. I mean, I've had a great number of chefs. You mentioned Jason Vincent just a few minutes ago, but there's been many, many more who have contributed both ideas, but also like just a ton of work. Because it's one thing to come. I mean, I come up with the ideas all the time. But just before we get on this call, I sent my current chef, Andrew Holiday, ideas for the next farm dinner that we're doing. And it's easy for me to be like, this, and this, and then do it this way. But it's like a completely another thing to like clean the asparagus and like try to figure out how to get what I want. You know what I mean? And they do that because it's their job, but also it's their journey too. But they have a huge hand, and I try to call out like when certain people have worked on certain dishes in the book. But mostly, I'm also just saying like I didn't write this. Didn't go on top of some hill and come up with all these dishes myself. Lula is there's 100 employees here. Everybody contributes.
And in other aspects of the world of food, and we certainly don't have time to go into this right now. This is it has been an important topic. It continues to be an important topic as to where these recipes come from and who gets credit for them. And you say that what matters then is the relationship of the chef to the source from which they take, the respect shown, the citations made, the power acknowledged. I loved that. It just said a lot to me, and if you know anything about food uh, and the journey and the history of food, it will make a lot of sense to you too if you're happen to listen to this and or watch it.
Yeah. And certainly that was an issue that came to light when people were talking in the pandemic about, what sort of place culturally restaurants had in our lives. And it's something that I just wanted to make sure that I was like, very clear and transparent about.
I want to read one last paragraph, and
Please.
you again. The friendships between the people who grow our food and our team of chefs have transformed our lives for the better. For me, it gives cooking a spiritual value, a resonance, something like the energy one feels taking a deep breath in a forest, exchanging what you don't need for what you do. Know your farmer may be a phrase in vogue, but for us, it's more than a slogan. It's existential. It's the sense that we are continuing each other's breaths, that we are in a community, part of a story bigger than ourselves. And I just want to say thank you for giving all of us the opportunity to be part of that story, not just at your restaurant, but with this cookbook, the Lula Cafe cookbook, because it is astounding as far as I'm concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's an honor to talk about, my life and work and all of this that's around me here. We're happening as we speak, and I really appreciate the attention.
Jason Hammel has been my guest. You've been listening, maybe you've been watching. Great taste. I'm your host, Steve Boss. 60 minutes of deliciousness.